Hello, and welcome to this episode of Claranet Cybersecurity TV. My name is Rory Hood, and I'm a security consultant in Claranet's Security Business Unit. In this episode, we'll be looking at the next item in the OWASP Top 10 list of security vulnerabilities, A9, using components with known vulnerabilities. The agenda for this presentation includes a brief recap of what OWASP is and what the OWASP Top 10 vulnerabilities are. We'll then take a look at the A9 entry using components of known vulnerabilities, and we'll discuss what this means. I'll then take you through some examples of where this issue typically occurs, and then we'll follow up by taking a more in-depth look at a case study. Finally, we'll go on to discuss remediation steps that can be implemented in order to remediate these issues, and to discuss security controls that can be implemented in order to help mitigate this problem. OWASP, of course, is an acronym for the Open Web Application Security Project. It's a non-profit organization that works towards improving the security of online software. OWASP are probably best known for their list of OWASP Top 10 security vulnerabilities, which are published in what OWASP likes to call an awareness document. The OWASP Top 10 list is designed to reflect a broad consensus of the most critical security risks to web applications. The list is periodically reviewed and updated every 3 to 4 years. And as the security threat landscape changes, vulnerabilities will naturally fall in as well as be promoted into the top 10 list, highlighting the ongoing changes and challenges that security presents. This slide shows the OWASP top 10 list as it stands today in 2020. And in this presentation, we're going to be particularly focusing on A9 using components with known vulnerabilities. In today's development environment, there's an increasing pressure to develop more complex software in a shorter period of time. The way this is typically achieved is by using pre-written software, usually in the form of libraries, frameworks, or services designed to do the heavy lifting for us. The advantages are typically that the software has already been written and is designed to be extensible enough that it can be built upon for a multitude of additional purposes. The problem is that all software, even software we don't write ourselves, has to be maintained. Over time, vulnerabilities will be discovered, reported, weaponized, remediated in all software, and that includes software written by third parties that we might rely upon in our products. So in the same way that you need to update your operating system in order to take advantage of security patches, so too do we have to periodically update the libraries and dependencies in the software that we write. An important point to consider is that it's often not a secret what technologies and libraries have been used to build your application. Often, the libraries themselves will disclose the version numbers in use, and where a library doesn't disclose its version number, it's still often possible to determine the version number by checking the computed checksum of the library file against known variants. Importantly, once an attacker has identified the version of dependencies in use, it's then trivial to compare these version numbers against online databases, such as the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposure Database, in order to identify any known vulnerabilities within these libraries. It's often the case that proof of concept tooling is available online in order to demonstrate the validity of any vulnerabilities, and where such proof does exist, it's very easy for an attacker to repurpose it in order to exploit the vulnerability. Several large breaches have been the direct result of exploitation of known vulnerabilities in third-party software. And one point to consider is that the more popular a library is that you're using in your software, the more likely it is that attackers will be looking for vulnerabilities in it. The discovery of one vulnerability in a popular library or plugin may result in the compromise of many systems, and to attackers, that makes finding vulnerabilities in shared components both attractive and lucrative. So now that we understand the risk associated with using components with known vulnerabilities, the next question becomes, how do we manage the risk and what steps can we take to remediate the vulnerabilities? The easiest way is to maintain an inventory of all third-party software you're using within your products. This should apply to the whole technology stack, not just the application, and should include everything from the JavaScript libraries you're using all the way down the stack to the database software and operating system. Each independent piece of technology will be subject to its own security patch and release cycle, and a compromise of any of these components may result in the compromise of your application and its data. Once we know the software that our application depends on, we can then audit it to ensure that the versions we have deployed feature no high-risk security vulnerabilities. This might be done manually by reviewing the version numbers in the source code or referring to the documentation. However, it's often more efficient to use an automated solution to identify vulnerable software versions. Retire.js, for example, is an extension to the Burp Suite proxy tool, which will allow developers to quickly identify vulnerable JavaScript libraries in use. For added convenience, it's also available as a Chrome browser add-on. Additionally, it's often the case that automated web application security scanners will feature built-in library detection functionality with the express intention of identifying and highlighting insecure libraries in use. Periodic scanning is therefore an easy, reliable method of identifying insecure libraries in use by the application. It may be the case that the vulnerabilities in these libraries are identified as low risk. While the remediation priority and risk appetite will be unique to your business, it is recommended that all known vulnerabilities are scheduled for remediation. While a single vulnerability on its own might be deemed to be low risk, the potential for successful compromise of a solution increases when it's possible to chain multiple low-risk security vulnerabilities together. And with that in mind, that's why we don't want to completely ignore low-risk issues, and we want to ensure they are scheduled to be remediated. Let's take a look at a quick case study. WP Discuss is an interactive comment plugin for the WordPress content management platform. It allows WordPress sites to provide dynamic content sections for their users. On June 19, 2020, it was identified that a high-risk vulnerability was present within the plugin, exposing 80,000 websites to potential compromise. A new feature allowed users to attach images in their comments. However, poor validation was applied to the files being uploaded, and it was possible to execute arbitrary PHP files and gain remote code execution on vulnerable applications. This vulnerability was actively exploited, taking advantage of the delay between public release of the vulnerability and the security patch being issued and companies applying it. While it's not possible to guarantee that third-party components will be free from vulnerabilities, a robust patch management process is key to mitigating the risk. In particular, we would recommend maintaining an accurate inventory of all third-party components in use, subscribing to security bulletins in order to gain early visibility of public vulnerability information, conducting vulnerability scans on a frequent basis, ensuring that processes are in place to quickly apply security patches in a timely fashion with a focus on fixing the risks that pose the greatest threat first, taking proactive steps to remove any software that is no longer required. While there is often a requirement to test updated libraries for compatibility before deploying, it is important to ensure that this is not an excuse for delaying important security updates. Security patching is important and should be an ongoing cornerstone of an application's development lifecycle. Thank you very much for watching. The next video will be the last in our series covering the OWASP Top 10, and we'll look at A10, insufficient logging and monitoring.